But after that, that's when the job hopping occurred. I think I was 21 years old, and between 21 and 23 and a half, or maybe closer to 24, I had job hopped between, I want to say 6 or 7 jobs. I'm not sure of the exact number. I'd have to think about it more thoroughly, but which is a lot of jobs for a 3 to 4 year period of time, obviously. And I knew what I was doing. To everyone else, it was like resume suicide at the time, obviously. Yeah. You don't want to hand someone your resume. They see you worked at 6 or 7 different places within a short period of time. That looks terrible, right? But what I was trying to do is figure out in an expedited pace what I did and did not like and what I was and was not good at. And I successfully did that. I found out I love digital marketing. I like helping small, medium, and large enterprises build their revenue through return on investment advertising. I like the technology side of it. And I found something that I can hyper-focus on because I'm very good at things that I love. I'm admittedly very bad at things that I have no interest in. Right. And so that's what I did for that 3 or 4 years when I was job hopping, is figure out what I didn't like and what I did like. And after I was done, I said, hey, okay, I figured it out. This is what I'm going to do. And I stuck to it. It's been almost 5 years since I started my first company.
Yeah, I think that's such an important concept, is like trying new things, because I think a lot of people, they kind of get in the real world, quote unquote, and they don't know what they want to do, or they're working a job where they don't really like, but they don't know which way to go. Mm-hmm. And I think the more you kind of put yourself out there and try new things, like for me, it was starting like a podcast, and actually it started with a blog, right? Mm-hmm. Me starting that blog eventually led to me doing the podcast, and now it's like allowing me to see other areas of marketing and media that I would have never been exposed to had I not started.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think
you talking to a lot of people is definitely going to help you figure out what you find interesting. So
yeah.
But I mean, just think about it this way, like how society is structured for most people, not all, is you go to high school. If you're your average middle-class student, you're probably going to go to college, and that you pick which college you go to at 18 years old at 17 or 18 years old on average, then you go to college at 18. Then you graduate by 22 to 24 years old, and then based on your degree, you get a job. And so you're very limited in your mind as the college graduate, you're very limited as to what job you can get. Mm-hmm. In reality, you're not limited at all. One thing I most certainly believe is that you can get pretty much any job you want out there as long as it doesn't require a degree. Mm-hmm. Like obviously you can't just go and be a doctor or a lawyer unless you can pass the bar in California, which is one of the few states that allow you to do that. But the professions like that, you have to go to school for. But everything else, you could go get a job for that. It may be a little bit harder. You're up against tougher competition that have degrees, but you can. But bottom line, most people are choosing what they're going to do for the rest of their life, perhaps at 22 to 24 years old. And that's just crazy because your brain's not even done developing until the age of 25 on average. And so how do you know what you do and don't like? You went to grade school, you went to high school, you went to college. You picked what your degree was going to be in at a very young age, and now you're getting a job based on what you picked when your brain wasn't even done developing. Right. Like, you probably don't even care about that nearly as much now as when you picked it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the way I went about it, to me, seemed very sane and methodical, while to others it seemed crazy, but I think that's a crazy way to go about things, if you ask me, you know.
So when you were, like, trying these different jobs and different ventures, I mean, do you, like, what's your viewpoint on failure? Like, do you worry about falling on your face and looking like an idiot, or have you kind of never really worried about that?
Failure, when I was younger, I guess, like, when I lost my job selling cars. Let's see here. I don't think I've ever said this on a podcast or anything. So when I was selling cars at 19, that was probably the last time I looked at failure as failing. Mm-hmm. Okay. And what I did was I was a top producer there, doing really good. I was the youngest guy they hired for a long ass time, probably. because I was 19. Next youngest guy was like 32 or something. And I got caught sleeping in a truck or something. And then I think I got ratted out, and I didn't even know I had been ratted out. And then I like got out of the truck, went to my desk, and then I was watching a video about a gameplay video for some video game that was coming out. And then my boss called me into the office and then canned my ass right then and there. Yeah. That fucked me up. I was that I looked at as a failure and was really upset because for some reason I highly valued that job, although I hated like cars and learning about cars. Like I just disliked it. The product and service knowledge part of that sales job I had no interest in at all. But that was the last time I looked at it as failure as a failure. After that, like I think it was probably a book I read or something that kind of changed my perspective. I forget which book. But I changed my perspective to where failure is a stepping stone or a learning lesson, you know. And that's really what it is, because unless you give up and you decide not to learn from a mistake, that's exactly what it is it's progress. Failing is progress. And those 3 or 4 years of job hopping and failing in certain ways really allowed me to get to the place I am now, where I'm definitely not failing in my own eyes and probably not in the eyes of others either anymore with the route I've been doing. Like no one really gives a shit when they're choosing my company as a marketing company, that before I started my company 5 years ago, I job hopped for 3 or 4 years. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But all that was an extremely valuable journey to me, because I could have very easily been locked up in a sales job that I hated for 5 years or 10 years and been miserable had I not taken the leap of faith to make myself look like an idiot in the short term, because to me 3 or 4 years when you're in your early 20s is the short term. You know, doing that allowed me to get here. So failure is a great thing. You need to fail. If you're not failing, you're not taking enough risks, and you're probably not making enough progress. So. Yeah.
And I think, at least in my opinion, I think when you, on the topic of personal branding somewhat, when people are like vulnerable and kind of put themselves out there and publicly express their failures, it kind of makes them seem more human and more like likable. So I want to do business with people that are likable, you know, that are like me. I get like the image of, you know, you're killing it, you're never making mistakes or anything, but I think there's also something to be said for someone who's willing to put themselves out there and say, yeah, I failed in certain areas, but I'm still here. I'm still progressing. I'm learning from it and growing.
Well, yeah. I mean, isn't that more relatable too, right?
Exactly.
What are the people looking at your Instagram, your Facebook, your TikTok, your Twitter, whatever? Are the people looking at your personal brand perfect? No. So they're not going to relate with perfect. Right. They may think that Lamborghinis and, you know, Louis Vuitton and all that's cool to look at, and they might feel envy due to that. But it's not exactly relatable. Perfection isn't relatable. What's relatable is like me, for example, like if I went on my personal brand after this podcast and made a post about like part of my journey that was like real shitty, that's relatable. Lots of people, everyone's making mistakes. Everyone's learning lessons, you know. Yeah. That's the kind of stuff that personal brands really should be talking about, because that's what makes them relatable. And if you're relatable, people are going to be like, oh, well, this guy who's doing pretty good is, you know, he had some trouble along the way, you know. Yeah. And that makes me feel like I too can do better. And that also is a much more valuable personal brand, in my opinion, because don't you want to make some positive change in people's lives? You know, if you're just making yourself look perfect, who are you helping at all whatsoever? Right. You know, someone might be inspired, I guess, be like, man, I want that. Maybe I'll grind out. But if I look like I'm successful, but talking about all the shitty stuff that happened along the way, that's going to make it to where the audience is like, well, shit, like, man, he's had it worse than me, or I almost, I have it worse, but not too much worse than that. And I could do this, you know? Yeah. And that helps inspire people.
People like people that are like them.
Yeah, you know? Definitely.
So I know that your personal brand is something that you kind of want to really focus on and build over time. And I think that's something that's going to be very valuable I mean, as time goes on, is a personal brand. I think you're going to see a lot more companies focusing on personal brands behind the companies more so than trying to hard sell someone. So like what's your goal with building a personal brand, or like why do you want to focus on that?
I want to focus on it because one thing I found out probably just within the past 2 years or so, I've wanted to build my personal brand for much longer than two years, but the reason why I'm building my personal brand has changed within the past 2 years. And it's, I found that like helping others and seeing something I said or an action I took, helps someone else, like really, makes me feel whole. Like, helping others like truly does like make you happy. And so I want to build my personal brand. That way it has more reach. That way I have the ability to help more people. And then, of course, inevitably, as a byproduct of that, I will make money off my personal brand as well. I own a few businesses, and so being able to talk about the success stories of these businesses and really letting people see my journey to where I'm at, what I'm doing now, talking about Vi Media or the podcast company or what have you. It'll help generate more revenue for the businesses. It'll help the people in the audience if I'm making the right type of content. And it will get me to a place where people can look at the personal brand and decide whether or not, if they're a prospect or someone that's in my target audience for one of my companies, they can decide whether or not they want to do business with me due to my personal brand more easily. Or if they're not someone who's in my target audience to be a client, they're someone who is trying to be an entrepreneur or is an entrepreneur already themselves, and they find what I'm saying to be valuable. And those are really the two reasons I'm trying to build a personal brand.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we're now kind of in a landscape where people are literally building careers around their personal brand.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, like an influencer is an actual career path now.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you love it or hate it, it's the future.
No, I mean, we're here. It's not going away.
Yeah. So it's interesting.
It is.